Shalom. I'd like to start out by giving all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham, Rakak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone, and Shalom to the elect of Israel. This is Thamayim in Atlanta, and I've got this TikTok video pulled up, and this woman goes into the curse of leprosy. And I thought this was interesting because it was the first time I've ever seen anyone of her complexion go into leprosy. And I've got to say, she does a good job of it. She says a few things that I might need to look into a little bit more. But for the most part, she is telling the truth. And I thought it was heavy just to see someone that has the appearance of being an Edomite going into it. She could be a one of the scattered sheep, or she could be an example of the Edomites' tongues falling onto themselves. I'm leaning more towards her being a scattered sheep, though, because she's actually telling the truth, and I didn't hear too many tidbits of lies in there like Esau usually does. But we'll go ahead and listen to her and let her tell it.
Way to correct some false teaching and lies that you've been told while sitting in church or even watching movies, reading books. Moses, chosen by God, given the 10 Commandments. Most of the laws are based on that today. Even your Constitution in America some of it is based on the 10 Commandments. Moses, born in Africa, raised by Africans. Moses was a Hebrew, an Israelite, and a black man. All Hebrews were black. He married a woman from Ethiopia, and his sister Miriam didn't like this. She didn't like it because Ethiopians had a different culture to them. So she was talking bad about Moses marrying out of his race. So God was listening to this, and God said, Miriam, Aaron, who the one she was gossiping to, and Moses, please come to the temple steps. I have some things I want to speak to you about. So they were on the temple steps, and he said, Miriam, you have been talking about your brother Moses, slandering that he's marrying outside of his culture. That is a sin. He said, so for your punishment, I'm going to strike you with leprosy and whiteness. So she was struck to become a white leper. Now, you can read all this for yourself. The whole story is in Numbers 12, starting at verse 1. So then Moses saw this, and he said, please, God, she's my sister. She probably didn't mean to talk about me like this. Please, I beg you, restore her back. I don't want my sister to be a leper. So God, he loved Moses. So he said, Moses, if she was talking bad and your father found out and spat in her face, for 7 days she would be ashamed and have to stand outside the house. So for 7 days then, she will become a white leper. Then after 7 days, I will restore her. But do not forget this lesson. So this you can read for yourself. So next to racism, which is a very dark thing in people's hearts, is jealousy and envy. And be very careful, because what the Bible says about envy is, and you can read it, Proverbs 14:30, it rots your bones. Sunday, a good day to correct.
So there you heard it out of the horse's mouth. And yeah, that's the first time I've heard anyone looking like her actually go into leprosy. And what it is in the scriptures, it's not, as I grew up thinking and hearing, that leprosy was rotting of the skin and getting all these bumps and different appendages falling off. It's actually the loss of pigment. And she told it correctly. And we've all been lied to. There's been most of Christianity is a big fat lie. And the Israelites of the scriptures were dark skinned people, just as she said. And she even went into Moses being born in Africa, which is born in Egypt or Mizraim, and he grew up in Pharaoh's house. The Egyptians are actually Hamites, and they are dark skinned people. And Moses was mistaken for being an Egyptian because he had the Egyptian garb on, and he also has dark skin. So let's get into the scriptures. This is Exodus 4 and 6. And this is speaking to Moses when Moses first met the Lord. And the Lord, Yahweh, said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom as in his chest, within his garment. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And what color is snow? White. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And so the Lord took his pigment away, and then he gave it back to him. And this must have been a fright to him. But if Moses didn't have pigment already, or he was a quote-unquote white person, this wouldn't be that impressive of a trick. It wouldn't even be talked about. But because he does have pigment, and he's dark-skinned, and the Lord took away the pigment from his hand, it had to, unnerved Moses to see himself like that. And it should, because that's the Lord's curse. Removing pigment from people. That is what leprosy is. It's not what we grew up hearing, and it being all these bumps and sores and appendages falling off. It's the loss of pigment. This is Leviticus 13 and 29. If a man or woman have a plague upon the head or the beard, then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be in it a yellow thin hair. And nowadays, what do we call yellow thin hair? We call that blonde hair nowadays. But in fact, it's actually a form of leprosy. It says, Then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry scale, even a leprosy upon the head or beard. And so that's just one more example of leprosy. And she told the example of Miriam becoming leprous, white as snow, losing her pigment, and she had to sit outside of the camp for 7 days. But this is also another example, which this is very popular nowadays, to have yellow hair or blonde hair, but biblically it's called yellow hair, and it is a form of leprosy. This leprosy was also the mark that was put on the Cain in Genesis chapter 4. And that's why he thought that everyone would identify him as being a vagabond and a murderer and would murder him. But the Lord said that anybody that killed Cain would be avenged sevenfold for it. But that's the curse that was put onto Cain, the mark that was put onto Cain, and that mark went with him in the reincarnation when he became Esau. And Esau also has this mark upon him, the loss of pigmentation. This is Genesis 25, and we'll start at 21. And Isaac entreated the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord Yahweh was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. And the children struggled together within her, and she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord, asking the Lord, You blessed me with children. Why is this such a struggle? Why is it a complicated birth? Why is this like this? Verse 23. And the Lord Yahweh said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb. 2 nations, showing a difference, a separation between the two. It says, And 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. So 2 different types of people, 2 separate nations would come from the 2 boys that are within her. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And so when it's saying he's red there, it's speaking of the lack of pigmentation. And lacking pigmentation, the blood is going to show through your skin. Therefore, they called him red. They called him Esau. And that is that's the mark of Cain that came with him in the reincarnation all the way to Esau. And this is what you see on the people that push supremacy around. It's almost like Napoleon syndrome or small man syndrome, where because you're lacking something, you overcompensate and try to make yourself better than what you actually are. And that's what modern white people, quote unquote white people, so-called white people are. They're clean lepers. They have the mark of Cain. And who else would the descendants of Cain be? They're bloody and murderous. Everywhere they are is stolen. And then just to drive home the point that the Edomites are red or leprous, clean lepers, and the Israelites are dark skinned. And this is something that's been covered up for ages and ages. We'll see how Solomon is described. And this is Song of Songs 1 and 5. And just before I go into this is Solomon speaking. It's not the Shulamite woman. This is Solomon speaking. It says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. This is where black and beautiful comes from. But let's get into that word for black. It's H7838.
Strong's H7838, Shachor, Shachor. And second entry, Shachor, Shachor.
And so you can see here in the outline it says black. The Strong's definition says properly dusky, but also jetty black. In the lexicon, you can see right here it says of skin. And let's see the Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. It says use of hair, blackish color of the face. And so it's actually speaking of appearance. And then let's go ahead and get the root for it. It says to be black of skin. And that's not actually black, because nobody on the earth is the actual color of black. It's just speaking of dark skin. And that is the description of Solomon. And Solomon in the reincarnation is Yahushai, or the man that people ignorantly call Jesus. Really, his true name is Yahushai, and that's the name you need to be saved. And since we went into this, I do want to, on a side note, say that just because you have the appearance of a white person does not mean that you are of the descendants of Esau. Israel was scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, and there are going to be Israelites that have the appearance of Esau. And if this message meshes with your spirit, then you are most likely an Israelite. But it's all about the bloodline, it's about the spirit, and Jacob and Esau have been the two closest nations. So there are a lot of, as it's called, chocolate-covered Edomites through the Edomite males mixing with the Israelite women, and vice versa. There are Israelites that have the appearance of Edomites because their father was an Israelite, or is an Israelite, and slept with a Edomite woman, or a woman that has that white skin, or the so-called white skin, because the scriptures call them red. But yeah, this is I thought that TikTok video was a good one to do a lesson on, particularly speaking of the leprosy and skin color. And it's also good to understand that the lineage is actually through the father that we will have, and that there are Israelites that do have the appearance of Edomites, but they're in fact Israelites. So, Lord willing, that was an edifying lesson. I'd like to give all glory, praise, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of the Great Millstone, and Shalom to the elect of Israel. Shalom.